Hi, everybody, and welcome to yet another of our Wise Wednesdays. You are watching season 2, episode 7, that we are doing with Dr. Rommani Sen Shitak, our guest today. Romani, thank you so much for coming as our guest. Romani has written a book on public service broadcasting in India, which is a study on Doordarshan. And you're a professor at Hinduja College. You're also a guide for PhD students on communication and journalism in the Bombay University. And I'm so excited and happy to have you come here also because you are a Lumière alumna. So thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Deepa, for the invitation. I think it was lovely to connect with you after a long time. And when I wrote the book and we connected over LinkedIn, and then we decided that we must do this for Lumia Wise Wednesday. So, and it's always good, like you said, because this book of mine, Public Service Broadcasting in India,
This
Study
one,
of Doordarshan. Yes. This book is based on qualitative research. This book traces the journey of the public service broadcaster in India, that is Doordarshan, which was India's first television channel, first broadcaster. So, this book traces the journey of the public service broadcaster from its inception, that how when it started, when television started in India, it started as a socio-educational project
yeah.
supported by UNESCO. So the idea was not to entertain people. The idea was that people need to be informed. People need to be informed citizens. They have to be given some information which is of value to them, which can make their lives better. Entertainment, yes, but within the bounds of civility, because television viewing in those days was a family viewing experience. There was no such thing as me on my device, my son on my device. So it was a family viewing experience. The idea was that provide good, wholesome entertainment and somewhere prioritizing information and educational programs over entertainment. In those days, in the schools, we did not have science labs in all the schools. So in the Delhi Kendra, from where most of the programs were made for the initial few years, there were science experiments that were recorded, and
Hmm.
those were shown in schools where there was no science labs. So that was how children learned science in those days. I know in today's day and age of AI and YouTube or all the apps, educational apps, it seems like some distant and past story. But that is how television evolved in this country, and from there how Doordarshan transformed in a multi-channel environment, because post-liberalization India was not the same as the India of 1959. So, in a multi-channel environment, how did Doordarshan try to reinvent itself, not only to sustain but also reinvent itself and remain relevant to the vast majority of viewers? That is what this book makes an effort to document that journey of public service broadcasting and Doordarshan in India.
So, in fact, I remember how focused you were in 2010-11 when we probably met at that time. And you wanted to learn qualitative research so you could, learn to do interviews. And subsequently, I know you came here to learn about tools and the
Yes,
Atlas TI tool for
yes,
your analysis. And, I was so personally, I felt so happy to have, in a sense, played that tiny role in the making of this book. Again, a subject for my generation growing up. Television at home was a novelty, and so much of what you write over here, the history of how the programming, the kind of detailing that you have of the different uh, uh, the kind of content that was generated at that time in the 80s, in the 90s, and the evolution. I think it was a lot of a trip down very nostalgic for me
yeah.
to read it. How did you choose this topic, Romani? I mean, what brought you uh, to this subject?
Yeah. So, so I was always interested. Even when I was doing my graduation from Delhi University, we had a paper on development communication, and I was always interested in how media can impact social change, how it can play a role in influencing people, their attitudes, their behavior. And then I did my masters from TISS Mumbai, where again we had some exposure to development and the role of media and information systems. So somewhere around 2009 was when I was thinking of a research topic, and I was reading up, and there were different things and going on in my mind. And this is when I thought that I must connect to what I'm really interested in, that is media. And because, like, you also said that we have all grown up watching television. So
Yes.
we have done our homework watching television. We have sometimes missed our playtime because there was an interesting program being broadcast on Doordarshan. So I thought I must do this, and I must do this in a way that I document the story of people who worked at Doordarshan, the kind of programs that were made, what was the thinking that went behind making those programs, what was the idea, what was the philosophy
Yeah.
of giving certain kind of content on television. So that was something that I was really interested in. So I thought, and that is when I also started reading about the history of television in India. And that's when I came to know that television in India started on the West European model of public service broadcasting, which
Hmm.
seeks to give the audiences what they need to know, not what they would want to know. So I may watch some content today on social media, which I may like. I may be spending hours viewing that content, but does it make me a more informed person? Does it make me a more informed citizen? So public service broadcasting, I realize, is very essential in a plural, diverse, and in a
Yeah.
very a multilingual country like us. This is
Yes.
something I also noticed during the interviews, that there are some people who are interviewed who are from Kashmir. There was this gentleman I remember. He said that in Kashmir there are these different dialects, and there is Dogri music, or there is some folk art form, folk music, which is alive, and which is being, which is broadcast onto the global, or at least the national audiences, thanks to platforms like All India Radio and Doordarshan. Otherwise, they would have died a slow death. So that was something which was really fascinating, that how television can play a role in social change, how it can provide a platform to the marginalized communities, to different forms of art and culture.
In fact, because we've done so much of work on television that and on
Yes.
radio in qualitative research, and a lot in terms of content. Uh, when somewhere the agenda, even as a researcher for me, was how can this change the discourse and how can we bring about behavior change. So even whether you're working with print, radio, television, my agenda as a researcher was always beyond entertainment, and how is it that you can make these shifts. So Romani, you have talked about some the kind of the focus rather on information and education, moving to revenue generation, advertising, and you sort of, there's a certain sadness with which I think you talk about that in your book. um, what was that process of having these conversations? These must have been very, very rich interviews with the people that you talk to. Very, very senior people have been interviewed for this book.
Yes.
What was it? It must have been very moving for some of them to talk about their.
It was, and this art of interviewing, as I must say, that the time that I spent in Lumière, so I saw the focus group discussions happening. It's part of some of those discussions, and when I did my interviews in Delhi, I had to make multiple trips to Delhi to meet people associated with Doordarshan. So it really opened my eyes to that any issue or any problem that we are looking at, it always has multiple aspects and multiple perspectives from which we need to view it. So for example, when we talk about revenue generation, if we are saying that revenue generation is not important, and but then who's going to fund the media station, who's going to start fund the broadcaster? And this is a question that broadcasters all over the globe are dealing with, this question, that who's going to fund. And because subscriber money, probably I can pay a 1000 rupees subscription a month, but there are so many people who are disadvantaged because of their economic status, so maybe they won't be able to pay. So who's going to fund the broadcaster? So revenue generation is also important. uh, but I got, and also when I did my interviews, I not only spoke with broadcasters, I also spoke with media experts, academicians. So they brought this perspective about, that the broadcaster is funded by taxpayer money. It is not
Yes,
funded when we
not
say
government.
government money is. There's something Professor Usha Rodriguez very
Yeah.
specifically mentioned, that in
That's an
Australia.
important point that you make in the
Yes.
book, and I think Dr. Rodriguez's point is really important. That Otherwise, the whole thinking that this is a government cut,
Yes,
it's
yes.
government ka
Yeah, so
channel.
sarkari hai, sarkar is giving the money, so it can be a government broadcaster. And that viewpoint, I saw that many people had internalized it, so they didn't see a
Yes.
problem with it.
Hmm.
Whereas there were some people who believed that coverage given to government schemes or government policies does not mean that you cannot be critical about them. Your
Exactly.
focus has to be on the public, on people. Yes, you are giving coverage to government schemes and policies, because when and if you trace this journey of not just Doordarshan but any form of media in India, after independence, the whole idea, the focus was on nation building.
Yes.
There was this person, Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi Chabra, the marketing head at Doordarshan, and she put it very nicely. She said, the days when we grew up, and she talked about her childhood, that's 60s and 70s. So she said there was this very strong feeling that we have to do something for the nation. देश के लिए कुछ करना है, कुछ अच्छा करना है. So, and that by default, doing something good for the nation was seen as also not offending the government of the day or supporting it in its efforts, which is what the critique of the theory of development communication is. But then there were also a lot of people in Doordarshan who spoke about experiences wherein the focus was not so much on government programs or giving publicity to the government, but on covering uh, people's stories, on
Yeah.
involving people in the broadcast, or covering, touching upon those issues that really affect the lives of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So there used to be Kamleshwar who used to do Parivartan on Wednesdays. We used to, and I remember even as maybe class eight student, I would wait to watch those very thoughtful. And he used to be the editor of the magazine, the weekly Dharmayuk, and
Okay.
very good moderator. So had good people coming. So I remember the quality of content on Doordarshan from the information point of view. There was entertainment, there was Phul Khile Hai Gulshan Gulshan, and you had that on Friday. But it was not cinema and entertainment focus. It was, interesting conversations, little bit of Western content, but I think
Yes.
uh, that did shape the sensibility of the generation, I think.
Yes. Also, I think when we talk about entertainment, this is something many senior director generals said to me. They said that it is not that a public service broadcaster should do those type of programs which nobody else is interested in doing. That okay, poverty and environment. It's not that. It's also about doing entertainment, but doing it in a way that has some meaning, that has some concern with the impact of those programs. So, for
Yeah.
example, when Hum Log was broadcast,
Yeah.
the idea was, it borrowed its idea from the telenovelas of Mexico. That
Yes.
very subtly we give the message of family planning. That okay, if you have a very large family size, the care and the education that children will get will not be that great. Or if you have a smaller family size, you can live a happy life. Also, I think if you look at the contemporary media space, where there is a lot of talk of how OTT has given us exposure to all kinds of content. We would always say that who's interested in rural stories, गांव देखने में कौन interested. But then we are seeing rural India also being represented, their stories also being represented, and there is viewership for it. There are urban audiences as well watching something, watching a storyline which is based in rural India. So I think it's about how the treatment that you give to the content, and not always the type of content or the genre of content, so to
Yeah.
say.
So, in fact, even it was very interesting because of all the television work that we've done. Consumers would always say, viewers would say that हमको सीख मिलती है, and the seek was a big thing that they talked about. So, I remember when Balika Vadhu, which was Colors had just started, consumers would say, "Ke we are learning about why not, about Rajasthani culture. We're also learning ke what are the issues with child marriage, and what are some of the challenges." And when we talk about regressive content or content which so this is a what you there's I think this fine line about what is education, what is entertainment, how do you do it in a manner. uh,
Yes.
Udan, for example, was
Yes.
again about this woman police officer. So I remember a generation of women were inspired by that Kavita Chaudhary's sister
Sure.
story that you also have talked about in the book. So,
Yes.
Romani, what were some of the surprising things that happened? Is there anything that, any anecdote or anything you want to tell me that's sort of stuck in your mind, that I'm so happy that I got to do this, or I'm shocked that I discovered something like this?
Yeah. So, one thing which I was not aware, or I think which was really very happy to learn, that the impact that television and specifically Doordarshan had made in far-flung areas like Northeast and Kashmir. So, I
Hmm.
remember Mr. Basharat Ahmed, who was once a Deputy Director General of Programs, and he spoke about the impact that Doordarshan programs. He said in the Northeast, and because I come from a military background, I have lived in Jammu and Kashmir when at the peak of militancy. So I remember that our textbooks would sometimes be delayed by 2 months because they were curfew or something. So for these far-flung areas, television was like a window to the world. There was this cultural magazine which used to come, Surabhi. I'm sure you also must have seen it. So Surabhi was so many such programs which people living in the far-flung areas where you would not have so much of access to books or cinema. It was not even you could not go to a theater and watch a movie. So television was their biggest theater, their biggest concert. Their
Hmm.
the world would come to their home through television. So those stories and those anecdotes were really very, very interesting. And also the engineering division, I spoke with some people and they talked about the hardware part of it. That how behind the what you we see on screen, there's a team of the engineering division, because Doordarshan was also terrestrial for a
Yeah,
very long period of time. So it
yeah.
was not only satellite enabled, but it was terrestrial as well, and the huge manpower and cost that terrestrial required. I also visited
Some
some of
2,000 people you mentioned. Was there like a very big team? How it was
it
a
was actually in terms of the workforce, more than 30% of the workforce was in engineering. This is
ha,
something the Sam Petroda committee report had
yes.
highlighted in 2014. That being a programming organization, if only 18% of your staff is in programming and more than 35% of your staff is in engineering, then you won't be able to do justice to content, which is why people come and watch your channel. So I
Hmm.
think some of those aspects of behind the scenes, so to say, were very very illuminating, and which was something which I think most of us as viewers would not come to know. So, and I also visited some of the regional stations. That is one more story I would like to highlight. That the
Please.
regional stations of Doordarshan were pivotal centers of excellence, be it a DD Bangla or be it a DD Sahyadri. These were, I mean, in those days when we did not have so many private, language channels. These channels provided a platform to local art, local talent,
Yeah.
be it, cinema makers in Bengal, or even the Marathi channel of Doordarshan Sayadri is very popular.
Even now, I because sometimes I just out of curiosity watch the DD Sayadri, and they've had some very interesting content, very informative, very uplifting. Just because I'm very very interested in the subject and the
Yes.
themes they take, whether it's women empowerment, whether it is I think in the lockdown they were doing something for keeping up the morale and keeping
Okay.
up positivity. So they had
Yeah.
counselors, psychologists, they had people who work with in spirituality. I was very interested in that. You're very inspiring.
Yes. True. So the story of the regional stations and how they were also marginalized when satellite transmission came and when the national program started. That from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. and this happened somewhere in the mid 1980s. That the regional stations could not show their programs in the prime time slot, and
Hmm.
that how that led to marginalization of the regional centers. And of course, with satellite transmission again in 1994, the regional kendras, as they are called, they got a new lease of life, because now they became satellite channels. So even in the
Hmm.
prime time slot, people could watch the regional content in a language which was which they could relate with. And I think presently also we are seeing this, that there are people who are interested in regional content. We are seeing that movies from Tamil Nadu or Telugu movies are doing so well. So it is
Yeah,
also good content can transcend these barriers of language or culture, because somewhere there are certain core elements which we all identify with, be it our mythology, the themes, the stories that we have
correct.
grown upon. So
And what was the process of writing this book? I'm just curious.
So that is an interesting story because I finished my PhD in 2015. That's when my
Hmm.
open defense viva was done, and I was thinking of that I must now convert this thesis into a book.
Uh-huh.
So after a few months of break, because the PhD with work is also very exhausting. So after a few months of break, I started working on the manuscript because I had to convert the thesis in a different form as a book. And then somewhere in 2016, I think because of professional work commitments and other commitments, I could not devote as much time to completing the manuscript as I should have. And then in 2017, I became a mother.
Okay.
So then after 8 months of leave, I joined work, and then my world had completely changed, had completely transformed. So I was very happy in my space of going to, I mean, doing my work and coming back and spending quality time with my child, and of course being supported by my family. So this book had become a forgotten project, if I may say so. It was not even in the back of my mind. I'd completely forgotten about it.
Acha.
Then in 2020, when the lockdown happened, I think the lockdown, one good thing for, I would say privileged people like us, that we got some time to think about what am I doing, what I want to do in future, what do I want from life. So
Yeah.
at that point of time, suddenly my husband told me one day that you are thinking of writing a book. What happened to that? I
Acha.
said, that is now an abandoned project. I'm not
Huh.
going to do it anymore because now it's 2020, because that was when the lockdown happened. And I said the data, most of the data that I collected was updated till 2014. So I
Huh.
said now 6 years down the line, a lot of things have changed. The industry has changed, even within the Doordarshan. Some of the things that I have argued for very strongly, maybe the context has changed. So, how it would be relevant. But then, as I was having this discussion, I realized that even if the data is updated till 2014, it doesn't make it irrelevant, or it doesn't make it, inconsequential.
Hmm.
For somebody who would be interested in knowing the history of television, or would be interested in knowing an organization going through a process of change, for anybody like that, this book would be of interest. And because this book is based on in-depth interviews,
Yeah.
close to 60 interviews I conducted with director generals, CEOs of Prasar Bharati, that is the nodal body which handles All India Radio and Doordarshan, people from the programming division, news division, audience research, then administration and finance, because that is another very important
Yeah.
part of Doordarshan, engineering, news presenters. So I thought that this story deserves their stories and their anecdotes and their experience of working with the public broadcaster, of having some vision about making programs. At least that needs to be documented. So then, I think, and then it took again another 2 years, because the lockdown meant that sometimes I would go to my native place and then I would come back to Bombay. But in 2022, I think I gave a deadline to myself. I said that this year end, I have to send the manuscript to the publisher, come what may. So, and as November and December was approaching, so the clock was ticking. I was telling myself that I have to do it, because otherwise it would just remain in my, my Google Drive, and it would never be published.
Yeah.
So that's how I, then finally
So
decided.
you have organized this book into 8 chapters. You've
Yes,
also got a lot of charts, and I think a huge amount of very very robust tables, figures. I think it's a very it's a book that is very tempting. I think it is a slim book which is only 199 pages, 200 pages where to the
yes.
yeah. Was it at times seeming like it might become a 300 or a 400-page book?
No, actually, I wanted to keep it concise, because also considering the nature of the book, it is academic, and it has a lot of, anecdotes, and a lot of the content was also very sensitive. So some of it I
Ah,
had to change, because they're very senior people who had quoted, and when they
correct.
spoke with me, they said that if you are publishing this book, make sure that this is off the record, or this is not attributed to us. So I
Hmm.
wanted to keep it concise, also considering that, because I deal with students. So I mean, I teach students, so I also know that their attention span for text based material these days is less. So I didn't want to make it very lengthy in the sense, so that the important message should be there, so that people get the message and people understand the story of public service broadcasting that was trying to document. But yes, some of the details which I felt were too sensitive, or certain things which, like I said, because I had to update some of the content. Like I have spoken a lot about terrestrial broadcasting should be
Yeah,
discarded. Now, at present, that has already been done because they have shifted to digital mode. So,
yeah.
some of those references I had to delete. Yes.
No, I think it's very concise, and given the fact that there was so much history, I just laud the effort that must have come to keep it concise. So you really have been sensitive about that. You are also someone who's interested in this whole area of disinformation. So and data privacy. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I would also like to relate what this book talks about, because at first look, when you see the book, or when you read the book, it seems like a very academic book which would find its place in the reading list of some paper. But I think the larger question that this book also raises is for us as consumers of information, as citizens, that we should be careful of what kind of content we are consuming. Who's paying for the content that I am consuming? Because if I'm not paying for the content, and if somebody else is paying for it, then it will definitely have some agenda of the person who's sponsoring it. So I think it also, especially in today's day and age, when all legacy media institutions, be it newspapers such as Hindu, or even in the West, New York Times and others, are facing a crisis, because today a Hindu or a Hindustan Times is competing with a WhatsApp forward, because people are not placing so much of onus on that. Okay, I have to get my news from Hindustan Times only. They are saying, okay, Twitter pay, if I follow Western Railway, I get the news, or if I follow Mumbai Police, I get the news. So in this day and age, I think it is very important to get our information from credible sources. So as people, as consumers, this would be my earnest request to everyone to subscribe to those media channels or those platforms whose content you really like, you find credible, and also to pay some attention to who's owning the media whose content you are consuming. There's this very interesting book which is also reading a couple of weeks ago, The Filter Bubble by Eli Parisa, and he talks about and the author talks about the fact that we are living in a world where technology is deciding what I should read based on what I click, what I shop for, or so. In this day and age, coming out of this filter bubble, not just knowing what is based on my reading, or based on certain profiling of mine, I also need to know of topics which may not be of immediate interest, but which will open my which will let me know about the world, or which will give me exposure to other issues or other topics which may not be of immediate concern to me, but definitely impact the world around me, the world that
Hmm.
I grew up in, or my children grew up in.
Yeah, yeah, and especially in the age of AI, where we are spoon-fed those feeds based
Yes.
on what we have done, it does get a little spooky.
Yes. So in that sense, I think when we talk about disinformation, research has shown that false news has 70% more chance of being retweeted on social media.
Ah,
And as we all see, I think this is something we all deal with. So early in the morning, when I pick up my phone, I see some forwarded message, and I think it is also on each one of us to counter, or at least make people aware that when they're sharing something, please be a little careful. Please cross check, verify, and using technology, the same technology which may also have certain concerns, also empowers us. So if I get an image which tells me that this is happening in XYZ that part of Maharashtra or India, I can use something like a reverse image search to check the veracity of the image. So using simple tools which we citizens can do, which we citizens can employ in our day-to-day social media verification. So using that, at least we should try and make an effort that when somebody is spreading information which I feel is harmful, which could harm somebody, do I make an effort to at least ask the person that have you verified it, or at least I verified, and I do it because I remember last year when this was when Afghanistan, the Taliban had a takeover of the government, and there were these videos which were coming on the WhatsApp groups that women are being openly sold on the streets of Kabul, and there was some video that was being shared, and this was refuted by the online news platform The Quint. So this was actually video taken from a street play done on the streets of London, which was about that play was made to make people aware about sex slaves, being used by ISIS. And that video of a street play in London was being misrepresented as something happening in Kabul. So I just posted that article on my, that group where I was part of, and I said that this is not the true story. This is the actual story. So I think this is something we
Yeah.
all need to talk about, and we need
Yeah.
to do this also even in our homes and families, because a lot of this disinformation is spreading through personal networks. So my
Yeah.
friend or my father or my mother or me sending something, and people are trusting it or people are believing in it, or at least giving attention to it because they feel, oh, she's my teacher, she sent it to me, she's my friend, she sent it to me. So we are all vulnerable in this world of disinformation. So we must be very, very careful and guard ourselves against such
Yeah.
kind of misinformation and disinformation.
We've busted time, but I just want you to talk about data privacy, Romani, for a minute.
So when I talk about data privacy, and I will definitely draw on my experience as a teacher, I think many of us, and especially students, I see this that we are sharing our phone numbers, we are sharing we are friending anybody on social media platforms. So we need to be a little bit mindful, because and there's a lot of literature available, there's a lot of videos, it's not something which is very difficult to understand, that whatever we are sharing through our device, whatever information once I put in my device, it can be accessed by someone or the other. So if I'm uploading something on my social media page, at least be aware that it could be misused. And why I'm giving reference to young people, because we have come across instances where just in a fun way, some seniors and juniors were having some fun on Facebook, and I'm talking about at least 6 years ago, when Instagram was not the most popular platform, Facebook was. So they were just having some harmful fun conversations, but they were pulling each other's leg, and they were using some language which was definitely not appropriate. And so being mindful that all of this can hurt you one day, what you are sharing, what you are writing, what you are posting. So even if I feel very passionately on some subject, uh, before I post it on social media, I need to understand that what are my privacy settings, or who are the people who are going to read it, or tomorrow can this information haunt me? If this information were to be made public, uh, can it make me embarrassed that, oh, why did I write this 5 years ago? I should have been a little more careful. So I think, and these conversations on media literacy need to happen, because especially with young people, and not just young people, even old people. I think I see my parents being so excited that they are using WhatsApp, and I think we all will agree that we are seeing that. So
Yeah.
having these conversations during our breakfast or during our family conversations about what we share, the kind of videos we make, or the kind of photographs we share is important, because we are all learning here. It is a world where every day the technology changes. So we learn something, and then chat GPT comes or something other comes.
Yes.
So learning from each other and helping each other, I think, is the way forward.
Yeah. In fact, I could keep talking and asking you questions. You have been so eloquent. And I think this conversation has been really rich and fascinating. I compliment you once again for writing this book, Public Service Broadcasting in India, A Study of Doordarshan, a very important book. I really
Yes.
think that this is a very important book that we need to get hold of. Uh, where could we find this book? When how
So this
does
is
the
available
someone
on
who
Amazon or Flipkart, or also on Blue Rose store. Blue Rose One, that is the publisher, on their online platform. They have their Blue Rose One store. From there, also one can purchase it. And thank you, Deepa, for this invitation, for giving me an opportunity to talk about my book and having this very interesting conversation. And I completely agree with you. I think we can just
go
go
on?
on having this conversation, and that tells me that I need to visit the Nehru office and have an extended conversation with you on these and other issues.
Absolutely. And do you have another book in the offing, Romani?
I'm now that I've got some good response for this book. So I'm also thinking that maybe in future, my experiences as a teacher, especially students from coming from different backgrounds, different cities, and this whole experience of teaching and mentoring. Because when I entered teaching, I felt that okay, teaching is going to be very academic. That you will read about and you will deliver some knowledge, and that is not what it is. And it is a lot more about mentoring, about counseling, if I may say so. Understanding your students, understanding the situations or the difficulties that they face in life, and helping them grow, helping them develop that self confidence, I think is all that they need. So I think definitely, maybe another 5 or 10 years from now, who knows, we may be having another conversation on my nuggets of experience from teaching and mentoring students in colleges.
I will be waiting for that. And thank you once again for this, what I think your PhD thesis, which has become a eminently readable book, Romani. I, I see myself sharing this with a lot of friends in media as well. I think it's an
Thank you,
important
Deepa.
book.
Thank you for all the love and support. It's
Thank you.
very
Thank